This is a video just to talk about my B&O system and the 5-year journey it's been to get this thing into working condition. It's definitely been worth it. It is an awesome stereo, and overall it has not cost me an awful lot of money. Certainly for the power and the quality I've got as a result. So this has been a 5-year slog, and I'll talk about some of the issues that I have encountered along the way. So if you were happening to look for one of these systems or building one of these systems, what you would expect to come across. The first component that I managed to source was the amplifier, the receiver. That wasn't too hard, they're quite available, and I bought this one from Bath, and I did the sensible thing. I drove down to collect it. It was about 150, 200 miles to go and get it. Made a weekend of it, so I had a little holiday at the same time. So the other half was pleased. She was quite happy to go away for the weekend. But unfortunately, it didn't fully work. It wasn't advertised as working, so that's not a problem. Unfortunately, I didn't really realise at the time just how difficult it was to get these systems worked on. Very few electronics repair shops are willing to look at them. They're more like an 80s computer than a hi-fi amplifier. They've got memory, they've got things that are more akin to a computer. So it sat in an electronics repair shop for 2 years, and I thought, this is never going to get fixed. And eventually you find the right man for the job. Tim at BO Central, I contacted him, and he sorted it out in a very quick time, a couple of days. After all that time of sitting around, I was completely thrilled to get my amplifier back and working. I won't bore you too much with the specs because obviously it's all available online and you can read that if you're particularly interested. You probably know it anyway. But some things that are quite interesting that people don't necessarily know, things like the loudness curve is actually adaptive depending on the volume that you're at. So at low volumes it will boost the bass more if you've got loudness on than at high volumes. So it adapts to our hearing. I will say that it's plenty powerful enough to cause permanent hearing damage if you're not careful. It is a significantly loud amplifier. Something else that it does that's quite interesting, if you press the monitor button under the front flap and the power button at the same time, it will run a little test program. And if all is well, it gives you a TP for test passed, or an error code if things aren't working correctly. The next part of the system that I managed to find were the speakers. These MS150s are really outstanding speakers and incredibly rare. They only made them for a couple of years and they were £1,000 in 1980. So not many people bought them because of their size and the sheer expense, I imagine, at the time. The speakers themselves required some work. They needed to be refoamed, but overall they were in really nice condition. They had the frets with them, which are quite hard to find as well if they're missing, as well as the stands. Again, they're unique, I believe, to the M150s and MS150s. So again, pretty hard to get another set, and are essential for these speakers because the port is actually underneath. Not wishing to bore people on specs, but they are a 10-inch stub, an 8-inch mid, a 3-inch dome tweeter, and then another 1-inch dome tweeter at the top. So well spec'd, very full of drivers, if you like, for a speaker. The main body of the speaker is to provide room for the sub, and the other two are insulated from there. The tape player I actually acquired from a cash converters for £5, so that was a brilliant deal. Of course it didn't work, like everything else. And the belt drives needed to be changed, but there was also a problem where the tape would engage and disengage without playing, and that was a capacitor that had gone bad. But other than that, it's been a brilliant tape player. It sounds fantastic. These tape players do some interesting things where they can work out the thickness of the tape, and they can the higher spec ones can actually measure the noise on the tape and the sound of how the tape records the sound by doing some test signals, and they'll adjust the recording to suit the quality of the tape you've put in there. Really clever stuff for the 1980s. Also, I could be wrong, but I think these are the first tape players to feature Dolby noise reduction, and they're widely regarded as being a pretty high quality tape player. Many people disregard Bang & Olufsen stuff as being poor quality. I think it's mainly due to some of the cheaper level stuff that they made in the late 80s and early 90s when Philips were taking over. The earlier stuff is really fantastic quality, outstanding quality everywhere. As far as I can tell, at least, it sounds fantastic to my ears. The Beogram 8000 system is really finished by this record deck. This is the final piece that I managed to acquire. I got it from a good friend and it didn't work for a while. I had it just as a display item, but eventually got around to taking it down to Tim at BO Central to sort out the problems that it had. The few problems that it had were to do with, there were some power supply issues inside. The sensor on the record arm didn't work. They were the main issues, really. He reckoned it had been used for spare parts at some point. He said lots of stuff looked like it had been unsoldered and resoldered in its time. But nevertheless, it's a really good deck now. It's working. I'm very happy with it. And it is quite unusual in the way it works as well compared to most record decks. So most record decks tend to have a belt. This is actually a linear drive motor. So them transformers that you can see there, there's one outside and one inside that metal can, and that is the drive motor. So there's no actual drive belt at all to this deck to go wrong, other than the one for the tangential arm. That's the only belt in the system. And the way it actually senses how fast the record is going and adjusts how fast the record is going is via a feedback loop. It works a bit like a car speedo sensor or an ABS ring. It's a slotted disc with a sensor, and that detects any fluctuations in the record speed, and it will keep it to an exact constant speed. So there's no worry about a belt slipping or anything like that. Really a very advanced system, and it works to good effect. I'm currently still got the original plastic one in here. There's a few fractures in it, but it still works. I've got a metal one to replace it with at some point when I'm feeling brave and willing to tear into this. But whilst it's working, I figure it's best to leave it alone. So just a little demonstration of how this works. You press the phono button on the amp and the stylus moves ready. I'll put a 10-inch disc on, literally just to show that it will auto-detect the size of the disc and start playing from a 10-inch. On here you can also adjust the speed. So if this is designed for classical musicians, if you wanted to tune the instrument, tune the deck to your piano, you could increment the speed of the deck so you could play along. I think that was a general idea, and that could be changed in very small increments. It's easy as well to skip. None of this lifting the needle off and moving it around like on record decks. You just push a button to skip tracks. Amazing, really, for 1980. You turn it off on the amp and the whole thing shuts down and puts the stylus away all on its own. The deck itself is so free rotating that it actually has to reverse the linear motor to show that it's braking. Otherwise it would keep rotating for ages. Okay, so the final bit I'm going to show you is my CD players. I've got two CD players on the go, which might seem a bit odd, but they do sound quite different, surprisingly. I've got a 6500 CD, which sounds quite bright, and it's a very clear and crisp CD player. And underneath that, I have got a CD50, which is a much warmer CD player. And the way I describe it is, it's almost like it's got the thump of vinyl with all the clarity and all the crispness of a CD. It's kind of a best of both worlds, and generally the CD50 is my go-to CD player, especially for older music, 70s, 80s music. For newer stuff, some more 80s electro and onwards, I tend to go for the newer CD player. But really it depends on the genre of music to which one I would play in it. If I feel like it could do with warming up a bit more oomph, I'll put it in the CD50. If I feel like it's something that wants the clarity, I'll put it in the 6500. Depends on the mix, really. What's really entertaining is the way the draw comes out on the 6500 is so quick, and then the CD50 is really quite clunky by comparison, but it's a brilliant sounding CD player. Well, that kind of concludes the tour of the system. It's been a longer video than I was anticipating. It's been pushing on for 10 minutes. So hopefully I haven't overly bored you. But I'm guessing if you made it this far, then you must have been interested in the system in some way. It's really for people who are looking to buy one of these systems, looking to build one of these systems. What kind of things you're going to expect. You have to think of it as a hobby. It's not as simple as going into a shop and buying a ready-to-go new system. But you do get a lot of satisfaction out of knowing that you're using something classic, you're using something a bit different from what everyone else has got. And overall, they really do have a really good sound to them. I would recommend anyone listening to a set, if they can, get hold of one to listen to. They're much better than people would maybe anticipate them to be. So really, if you're interested or got any questions or comments or anything, feel free to add them into the box below. If you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing some more videos on other stuff that I do. I'm into things like old motorbikes, I'm into things like old cars, building boats, model boats, not big ones, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in any of that sort of stuff, just kind of mantiques, I guess, then feel free to like and subscribe. I'll maybe do some guitar videos and things like that as well. I'll see whatever sort of things I'm interested in at the time. Thank you for watching, and maybe see you again.